Greetings, Relief Valve listener, and Happy New Year. Back in the third interview on the podcast in September of 2020, which I know feels like it was a lifetime ago, I spoke with Edward Branley. Edward is a writer, teacher, historian, and computer nerd. He's the author of 6 books on the history of New Orleans, as well as several young adult fiction novels. He also teaches computer classes on high-end topics such as converged computing environments, high availability, and enterprise storage management. So when Edward and I chatted last year, we had a fun conversation about our humble experiences in the pre and early personal computing era. And we also spoke about the situation in the job market, right smack in the middle of the pandemic. But it didn't really fit into the amount of time available for the episode, so it landed on the cutting room floor. So I'm going to release it here for you all as a bonus while I'm working on finding more folks to chat with for 2021. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you have a safe, happy new year, and wear your damn masks.
Well, I got to, it's like the computer side of things. My dad, who he's gone now, but yeah, when he was alive, he was the manager of the electronics shop at the University of New Orleans, and so. I mean, I'm like 11 years old, and he's hooking me up with the computer science profs and that kind of thing on an old DEC system, their old DEC system 10, that kind of thing.
Yep. I
So
go back to the PDP-11 days myself, so
there
I
you
know.
go. You know what? We had tons of PDP-11s at UNO because of the oil and gas industry, and so when they would upgrade, get rid of, they would donate. It got to the point. I didn't take this guy; I was a history teacher, right? But the CSI program at UNO had a class that was make your own operating system. In other words, the final was your product, right? That kind of thing. They threw you the PDP-11 assembly manual and said, make an operating, because there were enough. Like I said, they had like 5 PDP, they had like an 1144 and 21177s. Yeah, they had all of these mini computers that the oil and gas companies would donate them to the university as a write-off, right? And they would move on to the next biggest thing. Yeah. So, well, anyways, I go back to that's where I learned. See, I didn't do. I did Ristus. We learned Ristus when I was in high school and everything, but I kind of missed in the 80s. I kind of missed the whole VMS thing because we were always playing with the PDP-11s, and so we started messing with Berkeley Unix. And so I stayed kind of that, and then Radio Shack. I don't know if you know this.
I ran a Trash 80 for a while also. So
the TRS-80 Model 16 was a 5-user Xenix system. And so there you go. Radio Shack at one time, this is like 83-ish or so, had the largest installed user base of Unix in the world. Because
it was, from a commercial perspective, there was no way at that. PC hardware was really hard to get and really expensive back then.
Right.
Because I remember. Yeah.
Well, you know what? It's the operating system at the time was called Xenix, right?
No.
Okay, it was licensed from AT&T by 2 guys that you might have heard of, named Bill Gates and Paul Allen.
Yeah,
they licensed it, but AT&T came back and said, "Okay, we'll give you a license to make Unix for these little PCs, but you got to change the name in case it bombs." Because if it blows up, we don't want it to be, we don't want it to be associated with real Unix, right? So
you gotta give Bill Gates credit. If aside from the fact that he's one of the richest men in the world and he built this massive computer thing, right? He somehow managed to convince IBM to let him continue to own the rights to an operating system that he developed for them under contract, right?
Right.
Because that's PC-DOS and MS-DOS, right? Came from that. And I don't know how the hell he managed that, because IBM was probably one of the largest corporations in the world at the time.
I
and they just
I have a suspicion on this that I've always had. I think it's arrogance on IBM's part. I don't think they thought PCs were going to be that big a deal.
you're I think you're absolutely right. And it's funny because around the time when all of this was happening, of course, I was a kid fresh out of high school, but I had started programming on my own. I taught myself, and I was working on IBM mainframes a little bit, System 36, doing key punch and that kind of stuff for
Okay.
people, a little bit of COBOL programming. And those machines were disasters in a lot of ways, right? Because
Yes.
IBM's method for making computers on the big scale was disk systems were made in Armonk, New York, and processors were made in Minnesota somewhere, and something else was made in another part of the world, and then they pulled them all back together in upstate New York and they integrated them. So you'd have a mainframe that would all of a sudden, in the middle of the day, for no reason, decide it's shutting down its disk system for a reorg because it feels it needs to, and the rest of the system just kind of has to throw its hands up and go, okay. And in the meantime, you're in the middle of trying to get work done, right? So IBM, some genius executive at IBM decided, you know what, we want to try to make a PC and compete in this marketplace. I guess they saw some success coming out of Apple at the time, right? Apple had the
Right.
Apple II. And they said, this could possibly be a new market for us. So they sent the entire crew of guys down to Boca Raton
Right.
in Florida and said, come back with a machine. Just build it all there and come back with a machine. And that's why the PC was so successful, because it was a single team of people who built it all in one place, integrated it all in one place, came up with the operating system for it, and it just worked. It didn't have the problems that other bigger computer systems had because of the way the computer companies operated at the time. So, and then Bill Gates came along and created the operating system, which we all know was kind of stolen from other people. I'll probably cut that out before I put this up.
You said probably.
Yeah,
It's all good.
yeah. And then managed to convince IBM that it would be okay if he kept a copy of it for himself, right? And
Right.
it changed the world. It's amazing. It's amazing to see how all
Yeah.
that started.
I've never see. And coming. I came from, like I said, I came from this big digital shop at University of New Orleans.
Yeah.
When the VAX rolled out, and what was that, like 81 or 82? I was already graduated, but because of my old man, I just knew all these guys and everything, right? And they were essentially a beta site for DEC. They, it's like they had, they started with the, VAX, like VAX 1170, and then kind of moved into just new models as they kept going. And I have a buddy. He ended up working for EDS, for Perot's people, and now he works for GM. He had a choice, an option of going to work for EDS or taking a year and being a graduate assistant at UNO, working nothing on that DEC cluster. And I said, I'm like, dude, do it. You're going to be the $500 an hour consultant, right? Yeah, but Uncle Ross was dangling a decent salary proposal, and he took the safe road. But you know how that goes. It's like sometimes
one of the true tragedies for me of the computer industry was DEC not being able to survive the transition from their big proprietary machines off into the kind of open source and services model like IBM did, right? Because the only reason IBM is still around is because they had $3 billion to burn at the time to survive that window of time when the market changed.
Right.
And DEC just didn't have the big enough market.
No, they didn't have the cash. And the shame of it was that when DEC acquired Compaq, that was the biggest match made in heaven, because what happened immediately when that took place was they took, because of course they're this is post VAX and you're into the alpha chipset at that point. They Compaq turned around and made a MIDI tower. They called it, instead of an alpha server, they called it an alpha station, and they made a mini tower, single processor alpha box that would run VMS or then at that time True64 Unix. And it was, oh man, it was like so competitive with the Sparks, the Sun workstations and everything. But well, what happened was that they got the Compaq people got greedy with the HP thing. If they would have left that be, I think Compaq would have been a player. It's like it really could have been.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that was one of the that was a Carly Fiorina, Meg Whitman thing that happened. Yeah,
and it was not pretty. Yeah, it's like
no.
I mean, it was now on a personal note, it wasn't bad for me because it's like who thrives in a time of chaos and mergers and everything? The consultants.
Consultants, exactly. Yeah, no, that was the early part of my career was exactly like that. I did the same thing. I spent I did a lot of consulting. Started out as a programmer, and then eventually worked my way into systems and Linux. Survived the Berkeley AT&T war, and I think the wrong side won, but that's another story. And then finally I didn't really settle down into serious career until I hit entertainment.
Gotcha.
Though I spent 4 years as a consultant, but I spent 4 years in aerospace, which was interesting as well because as a consultant working for an aerospace company, it was great. I had all of the work to do in the environment that was challenging, and I didn't have to put up with the military industrial complex.
Yes.
And then at the end, talking about EDS came in to outsource the computing environment. I was working for Hughes Space and Communications at the time.
Yeah.
And then they were trying to get ready to start cutting the company up and selling it off in pieces, which eventually they did. They sold the military systems to Raytheon, and then eventually the commercial stuff went to Boeing. And so at the time, part of how you do that when you're the CIO or not really the CEO, excuse me, of the company, is you try to turn your technology into a fixed liability, right?
Right, yeah.
Which you can't really do because it doesn't work that way. It's but you bring in an outsourcer who comes back and says, sure, we'll charge you $25 million a year and take care of all of your IT. And then it looks really good on the books because now all of a sudden your IT goes from this fluctuating cost to this fixed thing, right? The problem with that is it's like, oh, wait, you wanted a steering wheel in the car? Well, that's going to cost you an extra $50. No, the hubcaps for the tires, that's extra. That's not part of the deal, right? And before you know it, you've gone way over your budget anyway, but it looks pretty on the books. And so Hughes went through that same thing, and the consulting company that I was working for at the time basically got bounced out so that EDS could come in and take it over. And EDS tried to hire me, but I wasn't buying the line that they were selling me at the time. And so Hughes came back and said, no, we'll hire you as a senior systems engineer. I was like, okay, I get to keep doing the same kind of stuff I'm doing. Plus, I'll be involved in the complexity of separating the different businesses, right?
Right.
It's a big deal when you've got all of these integrated networks and servers and things like that to split them up and break them apart. And almost immediately after becoming an employee of Hughes directly, the rules of being a government contractor just starts banging across your head, right? I mean, crazy stuff. Like, I'd find a tape drive because I was head of a group of systems administrators over there. And I find a tape drive that's sitting in a cabinet, and I grab it and I put it on my desk because I needed something to do extra backups on. And somebody comes over to me and goes, wait, that's got a gray sticker on it. I'm like, yeah. So where'd you get that from? It was in a closet downstairs. Says, you can't use that. I said, why not? Says, well, if it's got a gray sticker, that means it was bought for a government project. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I said, okay. Yeah.
Now you're singing my song as an educator. Yeah.
Right. Well, but anything bought for a government project can only be used for that government project. After that, we can either sell it for its retail value or we can destroy it. Like, you're kidding me, right?
Yep.
and so, being the rebel I was at the time, I scraped the sticker off of it and continued to use it. But that kind of way of trying to do business, that and having to log every single second of your life to charge to projects was just got to be too much for me. And Disney came knocking. So
you talk about the you triggered a memory for me. Was I can't remember which it was a Compaq customer. I can't remember who, but I had gone to do some on-site training, And so this is late 90s, right? And there
Yeah.
is this stack of about like 5 or 8 Apple II, like 2+2Es
Yeah.
stacked up. Just, that look, right? You just
Yeah.
knew that's an Apple II, right? And
Yeah.
it's like 4 stacks of Apple IIs that were on the loading dock that were to be disposed of because they were bought for a project. And I'm just like, I would just grab 3 of these, throw them in a box, and FedEx them home or something if I
Yeah.
could.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, even in commercial, right, in corporations, the different
Yeah.
places I've worked, the business runs on a cycle where it actually, after a period of time, becomes more expensive to keep the asset based on the taxes that
Yes,
you have to pay for it than it does to buy new stuff and just throw the old stuff out, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
And
It's
so
crazy.
Right. So, like at the studios, for example, where we had thousands of Unix workstations, not to mention the big render farms,
Right.
we replaced a third of all of our computers every year. Whether they were good or bad didn't matter. We just had to pull them out of circulation because at the end of the 3-year depreciation cycle,
Yeah.
they were
They
more of a liability.
they flip it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was
We'd
just saying
either
that keeps me in business with the training, believe me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. We'd either donate them somewhere,
Yeah.
or every once in a while we'd get permission to sell them off to different employees, or we trade them in. But yeah, it was always crazy the amount of hardware that passes back and forth. That's really good because think about it. Like right now, we found this 2010 MacBook sitting in the bottom of a box in the house, and I just resurrected it. It's still capable of running, one of the most recent operating
Oh,
systems,
well, there you
and
go.
it,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, back in the studios, forget about it. That stuff was gone right away.
Oh, I believe it. Yeah. It's
So let's switch it up a little for a second and talk about the state of the job market and technology and all of the craziness that goes on there. Nowadays, it's because technology has become so ubiquitous, and we require every kid to go to college and get at least a
right.
bachelor's degree. Um, it's really easy to grab somebody out of school and throw them into the job at a relatively lower salary
Mhm.
and eliminate the need for the people who have the most
Right.
experience. We don't value experience in this country as much as we should. And that may be why we have a tendency of stepping on ourselves every so often.
That's
Um,
very true. Except, well, I will throw in one exception to that, and that's in the storage stuff where I work. Is the paranoia of data loss is so strong
oh
that
yeah,
you don't, it's like, it's like you get guys because it was. There's one thing I'll do this. I got a question back for you on that too. Is that the
sure.
paranoia of data loss is such that a lot of these guys are, it's like you've got guys that are into their 60s that are still working because the enterprise doesn't trust the young guy. But and which brings me to a question. You're talking about how it's like, you say in the tech circles you run that that there's that still that demand, if you will, for a college degree. And is that still
Yeah.
prevalent in your experience?
So I I so when I'm hiring somebody, a college degree, the only thing a college degree actually tells me is that they're able to complete something,
Right.
right? Because most university curriculums don't reflect what's really going on in
Right.
technology because it changes too quickly for them to be able to adapt to it. Um, what I'm finding is in the process of searching for a job, uh, what's happened is, so I'm going to go on a little bit of
Yeah,
long
that's
long
cool.
way here. So um, back in the day when you were looking for a job, you went to the local newspaper, you looked in the classified ads, you found a bunch of things that were
Right.
interesting, and you applied for them. You get a call back, you get vetted by a headhunter who then sends you on to the client. You interview there, they like you, they hire you, right? When the internet killed classified ads, um, all of a sudden, a job market that would say be just New Orleans or just Los Angeles became
Right.
worldwide, right? All of a sudden, I use LinkedIn right now as one of my sources for looking for jobs, and I use Indeed as my other one. And I see jobs in New Orleans all the time. I can apply to them anytime I want. Odds are they'll never make it through the system because I'm not local,
Get
right?
filtered.
And if the company's not going to pay to relocate, right? And so because a lot of people don't understand what they're looking for when they're looking for a technology candidate, and this is from real experience for me. When I worked at Disney several years back, I actually took the time to take our recruiter and teach her what we did in the systems side of the house every day, because the truth was I was getting a crap ton of candidates that came through that weren't very good. And that was because the recruiter didn't know what to look for and what to ask. Right.
So your filter was off.
So, right. So I taught them what a systems administrator was, and I taught them what the questions you needed to ask to find out if they were semi-competent, and then send it on. And it was really successful, right? For me, it was anyway. But the majority of people out there, they have no clue, right? They'll ask for, I want a guy who has 15 years experience using this application, which has actually been only in existence for 5 years, right? There's all these kinds of wacky requirements on the job recs. And almost every single one of them, without question, says they want at least a bachelor's degree, if not a master's degree. Imagine, if you will, I want to hire a senior systems administrator with 6 years experience and a master's degree in computer science. Like, that's going to exist.
That's not, and that's where I was going with the question, because one of the things on the storage side of things that I tend to see, and we see, as the people that I'm teaching, they're not even college graduates with a bachelor's degree. We've got, you know what it is? It's the ex-military guys, right? It's the ET4, the ET5, basically, petty officer second class from the Navy who's spent the last 5-6 years doing electronics. And then, of course, that's the perfect field service guy for a storage company, right? That kind of thing. Yeah. So that's the guys I see. There's
also a lot of businesses, especially the bigger ones, that take advantage of two government programs that give them tax credits. One of them is hiring people who've been out of work for an extended period of time, and the other is hiring veterans. So I think you're seeing some of that. I can tell you that as somebody who didn't complete his associate's degree but went to college in 1982 for a year, studying information systems and doing a lot of his work on punched cards. I've actually had recruiters or recruiting systems not even be willing to look at my resume because I don't have a bachelor's degree.
That's just crazy.
And so, to say that 35 years of progressive experience, from coding to systems administration to managing teams to multi-million-dollar budget management and all of that stuff, and say that, but you don't have a bachelor's degree, is kind of one of those things that, I don't have an answer for that. And it's out there.
I believe it. Yeah. So, like I said, in my piece, my patch of the woods, there's two things. One is that all of the government contracts that involve storage data centers and big storage farms,
big data,
that kind of
high
stuff,
performance computing,
especially if it's if it's classified, like you get into the NSA and all the intel people and everything. If you're a guy or a woman who was an electronics technician with a top secret clearance on a carrier or a submarine, you're going to be able to roll that into a job in no time flat. But you don't. The degree isn't a problem.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that kind of stuff out here because the LA area is a big defense.
Oh, absolutely.
Aerospace and defense, and certainly I keep an eye out on that kind of stuff as well. But I have the same problem, right? It's like I've got all the qualifications for the job, but I don't have the top secret clearance, and so they're like, half the time they won't even talk to you because I guess the process of getting that clearance is complicated enough that they don't want to go through the hassle of it if they can avoid it.
It's the idea. It's like getting
right. I mean,
that's what I wonder. Like I think about New Orleans, and we we went through our tax credit, entertainment tax credit phase, right? Which it didn't, the economics of it did not pan out anywhere near what people expected. The legislature dropped the program, and as soon as they did, something like 80% of the production companies bailed to Georgia because Georgia, it's MacGyver shot in Georgia, that kind of thing. And
there's a lot of stuff.
Right, exactly. So, but one of there's been a few things. It's like there's a good infrastructure, in terms of there's a good production infrastructure here in New Orleans, and then also, believe it or not, unbelievable kind of it's kind of weird, but up in the northwest corner in Shreveport as well. What was it? AMC, the Salem show, was shot up there, right? Because you could just build, you got to build a 1600s town anyway. You just do it where it's cheap, right? So, but anyway, with New Orleans in particular, I'm starting to think that, it's like the shows, like I could see like, NCIS New Orleans having the cast go back to California, and basically we end up with, basically just cameramen and production people, shooting B-roll or shooting, around the scene stuff, chase scenes where you got body doubles and stuff like that, so. Yeah.